Everyone to another episode of Level Up Law, where here at South Carolina Legal Services, we are leveling up your legal knowledge about all the areas of law that we practice in. I'm Susan Ingalls, Senior Staff Attorney and Consumer Law Unit Head, and with me today in the background is our producer, Kenneth Elliott. Thanks for being here, Kenneth, making sure everything's working properly for us and keeping us in line. Today we're going to be talking about the Informed Consumers Act, which just went into effect back in June of this year. So very recent, and I think everyone will be real interested in what it's all about. If you do any buying or selling online, you need to know about this new law. But before we get into that, I do want to remind everyone, as always, this is not legal advice. We are not your attorneys, but if you do need an attorney to represent you in something like this or some other legal matter that is within the priorities that we have here at South Carolina Legal Services, you can apply for those services, find out if you're eligible, if it's something we can help you with. And you can see here on your screen all of the ways to get in touch with us. You can also scan that QR code and sign up for our newsletter, do all kinds of things with that information. You can sign up for the newsletter. You can even make a donation to us if you're not someone who's eligible for our free legal services. We always appreciate that. Helps us do what we do for people who can't afford a lawyer. Also, you can see there all of our social media icons. Everything is at SC Legal Services, so please definitely go there and follow us. All kind of good information going out, including today's episode. As with all episodes of Level Up Law, we do post it on our YouTube channel, thanks to Kenneth Elliott, our producer, and that's going to be put up pretty quickly today. But also while you're there, go ahead and sign up. Subscribe, sign up for the notifications so you'll always know when we've posted a new video, whether it's an episode of Level Up Law or one of the other many videos that we provide to the public at no charge. All right, let's get started on the Informed Consumers Act. So our legislature always has to have a unique name for these laws that they put together, and this one is no different. It's called the Integrity, Notification, and Fairness Online Retail Marketplaces for Consumers Act. That is a mouthful, isn't it? But the acronym ends up being INFORM. So it's the Informed Consumers Act. It was passed back in December of last year, and is now effective as of June 27th in 2023. Enforcement is with the Federal Trade Commission and also our state's attorneys general, and anyone else who's designated for that kind of enforcement in our state. So just sort of an overall summary, I guess, is that online marketplaces, which we'll talk about what those are in a moment, could be subject to some pretty hefty fines if they are not in compliance with this act now that it's out there. So if you are a business owner, if you're a business, you're dealing with online buying and selling, you need to know if you are required to comply with this act. Let's go to the next slide. So what does this act require? Well, online marketplaces, which is defined in the law, where these third-party sellers offer new or unused consumer products, those marketplaces have to now collect information about the sellers. It has to be sellers that are a certain level of selling. So That's something that the Act defines as well. But the marketplace has to collect, verify, and disclose information about the sellers. This is great. You know, we have clients from time to time who come in and have entered into a transaction on, you know, Amazon, Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Craigslist, Etsy, all those kind of what we call online marketplaces. And maybe the seller didn't send the product, or the product was not as it was supposed to be. And although online marketplaces do have some ability to, you know, let you enter a complaint and try to get it resolved, they haven't always had a way for you to contact the actual seller. And so this act is actually correcting some of that for us. Penalties can be up to $50,120. That's per violation, And so what the act is doing is putting the requirement on these marketplaces who are making, you know, money by having people sell and buy on their online marketplace, and requiring them to collect all this information. In the past, we couldn't always get that information about that seller to pursue them. The other thing is that this act is addressing a real problem that we have had in stolen goods and counterfeit goods being sold online, and then having no way to really pursue the wrongdoer. And that's what brings us kind of to the purpose of the law. So lots of times you're buying from a seller, it's not exactly clear who they are, what their, you know, information is, you know, where they're from. And so this is going to add some, you know, some transparency to that, but also it's going to deal with those criminals that are getting stolen goods. And we'll see in a minute, I think, you know, last year it was like $500 billion of stolen and counterfeit goods that were sold online. So there's a lot of interested parties here. I mean, that even includes the big stores where things are being stolen from. It also, you know, affects brand owners who have a certain brand of product that they sell, and someone is imitating that brand. It gives them a way to hopefully pursue people who are counterfeiting their brand. So, and finally, for us as just individual consumers, we'll have the ability to report suspicious activity to the FTC or to our state attorney general. So it kind of gives all of us a real positive opportunity. All right, so let's talk about what is an online marketplace. I've already given you examples of that. Amazon, Etsy, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, eBay, all of those kinds of things. Those are online marketplaces. And a lot of people sell things there. Not all of them are high volume sellers, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there's a lot of money being made in these online marketplaces by sellers and by the marketplaces themselves. So this is going to be a person or a business that operates a platform that is consumer directed, which all those examples I just mentioned, that's exactly what they do. So they allow third-party sellers to sell, purchase, or engage in the sale, purchase, payment, storage, shipping, etc. of products here in the United States. Now, consumer product, that has for a long time been defined by something we call the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act. And so there, a consumer product is, as you can see on your screen, tangible personal property for sale, and that is normally used for personal, family, or household purposes. That's a definition that is used a lot in different areas of the law. And that Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act is a good definition of these kind of laws. Now, also, the online marketplace must have a contractual or similar relationship with the consumers that that are buying on their platform, and that governs the use of the platform. Okay, there has to be that contractual relationship. As you know, we always say before you agree to enter into activity on places like that, you want to read the terms and conditions, because you're clicking on a little box that says I agree. So that's the contract that they're talking about, involved with this law. You should always read that, especially now because it's changed a little bit with all these companies. So what is a high volume third-party seller? Because this is who this act really is directed at. A high volume third-party seller is a seller in an online marketplace that in a 12-month period has had 200 or more separate sales just on that one platform, transactions of new or unused consumer products, and has had $5,000 or more in gross revenues. That means not their net, but their gross, all the money that they took in for sales before it gets applied to whatever their expenses or overhead is. And also the only sales that are counted are ones that particular third-party seller sold on that single marketplace, either directly or through a payment processor. Now, there are some exemptions, or there is an exemption, and that is a business that has made their name, business address, and contact information available to the general public. So you may be buying from a particular seller that has a website that provides all that information. So if they're already providing that, they're not trying to be secretive or hide it or anything like that, that's number one. Number two, they have to have in addition to that, they have to have a contractual relationship with the marketplace to manufacture, distribute, wholesale, or fulfill shipments of consumer products. So they've got to have a contract with an Amazon or an Etsy or a Facebook Marketplace. And they are exempt if they also provide the marketplace with identifying information that the marketplace has verified. Now, the online marketplace itself is not a high volume third-party seller. You might think that they are because all their sales are happening on their platform, but they're not an actual high volume third-party seller. They're an online marketplace. Okay, what are they required to do, these online marketplaces, under this new act? Okay, they have to collect information from the sellers, that's third-party sellers that meet those requirements, that threshold. They got to have bank account information, contact information, and a tax ID number. They have to verify the information, and we'll talk later about how they verify. They also have to require sellers to keep that information current and certify every year that it is still correct. So if anything changes, the online marketplace and the consumers and others know about it. Now, if you have sellers, if you're an online marketplace and you have sellers that you've notified that you've got to have this information, there's certain time requirements in that, and they don't provide all this information that has to be disclosed, then the online marketplace can suspend them from providing products for sale on the platform. Also, they have to provide a way for the third-party sellers' products listings. So there's got to be a clear way for consumers to report suspicious conduct. So if something's happened to you on Etsy, for example, and you think something's going on, this is a legit seller, this product, seems like it may have been stolen, you as a consumer can report that, not only, of course, to the platform itself, the online marketplace itself, but you also have the right to report that to your state attorney general or the Federal Trade Commission. So that's important for us in this online world to have all this information, and as consumers have a way to report it if it's happening to us. And we'll talk later about who can actually file lawsuits or enforcement actions if it comes to that under this law. Okay, here's a little bit more detail about what they're collecting. So once this went into effect back in June, if you were a third-party seller, high volume on one of these platforms, one of these online marketplaces, then you got a notification, or should have, about this new law, and that you were required to provide the information in 10 days. I've seen a lot of commentary on this on places like Reddit and those types of places saying, hey, I all of a sudden got this notification that my account is suspended with Amazon because I haven't provided this information or something. I think there were some glitches too in providing the information and the online marketplaces getting it sort of registered. But I think everything hopefully has kind of been flushed out in the last 2 or 3 months. But anyway, on the bank account information, got to have account number, or if there's no bank account, there has to be the payee's name for the products. And that has to be provided by the seller either directly to the online marketplace or to some sort of payment processor like PayPal or those kind of things, or some other third party, so that there's clearly a specific account. That allows enforcement authorities to track sellers down if in fact it's nefarious, stolen or counterfeit product. Tax ID number, you got to get that, and if you don't have one, there and then contact information. Okay, if you're an individual, name, working email address, phone number. If you're like a company, a larger company that's a third-party seller, then working email address, phone number, and identification of the government-issued ID, like a driver's license of an individual who is acting on behalf of that company, or some other sort of government record, tax document, etc., that has that name of that business and the physical address. There's been a lot of problems with companies or criminals or counterfeiters who are selling something, and it turns out they really don't have a brick and mortar address. And that's okay in this online, virtual world that we live in, but there has to be a way for buyers and others to locate you. And it's a real red flag if you don't have some kind of legit email address, telephone number, or address of some sort, even if it's a post office box. But there is verification required of all these things. So what do they have to do to verify? Once they get the information, that the actual marketplace itself, they've now got 10 days to verify. That's a short period of time. So the act doesn't specifically say what they have to do, but they do have to do make a reasonable investigation to make sure that the information is correct. There are some things that are presumed verified. things like a government issued tax document, but you got to make sure that it really is a government issued tax document, because those can be forged quite easily, and we see that unfortunately a lot. If it's like a government issued driver's license, for example, or identification card or something like that, that's presumed to be verified. But otherwise, they've got to do their due diligence in determining, that is a legitimate phone number, that is a legitimate email address, and there's obviously, ways to handle that. And then also, you can't just, provide it one time. It has to be certified annually, and I think that's good. So for the third-party sellers, if they change their address or phone number, whatever, it's just a matter of providing that new information, which you should do anyway before the marketplace reminds you that it's time to recertify your information each year. All right, what are the disclosures, okay, that are required by this act? So the high volume third-party sellers, this is how they're defined. They have gross annual revenues of 20,000 or more on this one online marketplace. They may have that on others, and then they'll be required to disclose all this information to those as well. But it's per online marketplace that this identification is made. So what do they have to disclose? Their full name, which could be the business name or the individual person, physical address, and then contact information so that consumers can have direct unhindered communication with that seller. And that includes a working phone number, working email address, just like we've said. Okay. Also, if the listing includes a physical address for product returns, that is sufficient under this part of the law. So if there's, a different business that's used to supply the product, the online marketplace does have to provide the name, address, and contact information for that business to the consumer. That's why it has to be required that the online marketplace has that information. Now, here's an exception, and that is if you operate out of your homes. In that case, they have to, the online marketplace does have to, at the consumer's request, disclose the country and the state where the seller lives and provide that phone number, email address, or other means. It doesn't have to be email, it's best, I think, right now, or some other means of electronic message so that those consumers can contact that seller if they're just working out of their home. They may be high volume, but they're still maybe just working out of their home. If it's a personal phone number, if that's the only phone number that the seller has to give, then there has to be an email address provided or some other electronic messaging where the consumers can contact that seller. And then that way they don't have to, not required to provide your personal phone number if you provide them that other electronic way of getting in touch with you. Now, the other thing in the verification process is if the third-party seller makes a false statement, okay, they can be suspended by the online marketplace. The marketplace has the right under this law to suspend them. And if the seller doesn't respond to consumers within a reasonable time frame, that applies as well. Okay. Let's talk about how the online marketplaces will deal with the buyer's report of suspicious activity and the seller's non-compliance a little more specifically. So on the product listing page of any of these high volume third-party sellers, so each online marketplace will have that product listing page of that third-party seller, right? So the marketplace must clearly and conspicuously include the phone number and an electronic way for consumers to contact the marketplace to report suspicious activity. But that's got to be on that listing page for every third-party seller. So that way, when you as a consumer go back to that third-party seller's page, you will see if you are suspecting that there's some suspicious activity, you'll see that information on how to do that. Also, for the marketplace that's required to get this information, if any of their third-party sellers that have that high volume and are required to provide the information don't do so, then the marketplace has to give them notice of their non-compliance and 10 days to send that information in, or they'll suspend any future sales activity. And that's what I think some of these third-party sellers have been having a little trouble with when this all got started back at the end of June, and hopefully is starting to all be straightened out. Because when that's your business, you sell products on these online marketplaces, that's your livelihood. That's where you get your income from. So being suspended can really be a problem. Now, here's another requirement under the law for the online marketplaces, the Amazons, the Etsy's, the Craigslist, and all of that. They have to have some reasonable security procedures and practices. And this is for the purpose of protecting the people who are providing all this information and making sure that it's not improperly used. So there's requirements for that. And that includes, of course, not just, virtual things, but administrative, physical, technical safeguards that are appropriate to the type of data that they are collecting and the purposes for which it's being used. So if it's the data that is collected solely to comply with this Informed Consumers Act, that particular information cannot be used for any other purpose unless it's required by law at some point. Okay, so they can't gather all this information, which the third-party sellers might be worried about. Oh, I'm giving you all this information now that you suddenly need because of this new law. How do I know you're not gonna, misuse it? And that is covered in the act itself, stating that they're not allowed to use it for any other purpose than what this act is, using it for or wanting it to be used for under the act. Okay. Now, consequences for violating the act. Okay, it is a violation of the Federal Trade Commission rule if you violate this act. Okay, and that's anyone. The online marketplaces that don't comply, there's enforcement actions that the FTC does all the time under their authority in the area of consumer laws. And as we said at the very beginning, these penalties are over $50,000 per violation. So that can end up being a whole lot. And as I've said before, state attorneys general and any other officials that are authorized by the state to do this, like for example in South Carolina, our Department of Consumer Affairs is often an authority for enforcement purposes. So what they can do if there is a suspected or provable violation, they can file an injunction in a federal court because this is a federal law. They could also seek those penalties and any other remedies that might be permitted under state law for things like this. They can also get damages, restitution for the consumers or sellers who maybe lost money because of it, or just other compensation for the residents of that particular state because we're trying to protect, obviously, consumers. So what's your right as a consumer under this law? Well, we always look for rights for a consumer under something called a private right of action. And that means that the law provides, that particular act or statute provides that you can sue that seller, that online marketplace for their bad acts or whatever. And also for penalties and things, attorney's fees, things that you can collect as a consumer if they've done wrong to you. This act does not have that private right of action, but it does have some protections for consumers. It ensures that consumers or brand owners that are selling their brand items on these marketplaces will have accurate information so they can pursue those sellers directly. And of course, report suspicious activity. The thing that's great about that for consumers, even though we prefer having that private right of action under the Act, the thing that's good about this for consumers, and you can relate to this if you've ever had a problem with something that you bought online and you couldn't get in touch with the seller. Now you're going to have that information right there in front of you, and that way, as a consumer, you know where that seller is. Because if you're going to file a lawsuit for some sort of breach of contract or something of that nature against that seller, not something under this act, but just like, you didn't provide me what I thought I bought, or this was damaged material or whatever, maybe their way of trying to resolve complaints isn't working for you. You'll have that information where if it comes to it and you have merit to your dispute, you can actually file a lawsuit and you know where to serve that lawsuit on that seller. That's the information that's being provided. The other thing for brand owners, obviously they'll be able to track down and pursue counterfeiters and do something about that. Now, the sellers for stolen or counterfeit products need a mention here because just in 2022 alone, $500 billion in stolen or counterfeit products was sold on these online marketplaces. That's a huge amount, and it affects everyone. It affects the online marketplace, the legitimate third-party sellers, it affects the consumers, and it affects these brand owners. That's a lot. So the good thing is that putting that burden on those online marketplaces with hefty fines if they don't do what they're supposed to do, that really provides a lot better opportunity to have our rights as a consumer, a brand owner, a company that's getting a lot of merchandise stolen from them to be sold online. All of those people have more opportunity under the enforcement authority of this law and just the informational side of it so that you can enforce that contractual right that you have with that seller. So still, even though there's not a private right of action, there are ways that this law is helping consumers as individuals. And it's a lot of requirements on the online marketplaces, but I'm sure they can handle it. All right, so what should you do if you suspect a violation of the Informed Consumers Act? Report it to the FTC. Now, obviously, you could also report it to our state attorney general, but it is definitely enforced by the FTC. And so our state attorney general would just take complaints for enforcement from individuals in South Carolina. The FTC will be taking in those complaints from all over the country. And when they do that, this is the good thing about enforcement through the FTC, because they're the federal government and they take in complaints from everywhere across the nation, they can spot an area or a particular seller or marketplace or whatever that has a lot going on, then that has something that they should be suspicious of. And then they have that whole investigative authority, and because they really are law enforcement, they've got all of that ability to really investigate and track things down and do something about it. So that's where you need to report any kind of violations or even suspicious activity. So that's it for the Informed Consumers Protection Act. It's a very general overview, but it should give some good information to those of you who are buyers as well as those of you who are sellers. What's this all about? I'm a seller. Why am I getting all these notifications from these marketplaces where I'm selling my products about being in compliance with this act? Most of the, should be all of the marketplaces are providing you with all of this information anyway. And for consumers, this is a great thing. It will really enable us as consumers, us as lawyers representing consumers, to track down that seller and, if necessary, pursue them in court for breach of contract or whatever cause of action is warranted. Right. One more thing before we check out. If you want to suggest a topic for us on Level Up Law, scan this QR code and let us know what it is. We are open to the information that you need out there in consumer land. And, we do all kinds of cases, whether it be just consumer, but housing, education, public benefits, family law, all kinds of areas that we cover for you guys out there, elder and probate law. So just scan the QR code. Let us know if there's some law you're wondering about how it works, or some area of law that you need some more information on, and we're happy to try to accommodate that. And we really appreciate when people reach out to us and help us with what's really needed information-wise. All right. Just before we go, here's how you can connect with us if you need a lawyer. You can apply online. You can call on the telephone, but the online intake is great for those of you who are working during our same working hours, because our intake line is open Monday through Thursday from 9 to 6. On Friday, they do all their administrative work and stuff, so they're not open to take your call. But that online intake is open 24/7. So check it out. That can be a really helpful way to apply. And again, scan that QR code to sign up for our newsletter, and always go check us out and follow us, subscribe on all of these social media channels. We've, in the last year, been very active on TikTok and got a lot of followers there. We appreciate y'all, but we always need more. So come join us on social media. We have our YouTube channel, which has, I believe, over 400 videos. Level Up Law alone has almost 150, and we've been doing that. It's been a little over 3 years. Lots of good information there, and we're always putting it out and linking to it on our social media. So go check that out. Follow us, like, subscribe, and make sure you're getting all that important legal information that you need. And if you need a lawyer, call us or go apply online and see if it's something, see if you're eligible for our free services, and see if it's something that we can help you with. In the meantime, that's all we have for today. Be sure and join us again next Tuesday for another live episode of Level Up Law right here at South Carolina Legal Services. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Whether you're live or on the replay, we appreciate you. Take care, everybody.